Mount & Blade 2 Bannerlord has a wealth of troops to offer across infantry, archers, cavalry, everything, but with 6 cultures to choose from and a bevy of options, which ones are the best? In this video, I aim to discuss just that by doing a tier list for all the max rank cavalry in the game. I'll be ranking them from D to S tiers according to their stats, armor, and recruitment availability across the map. We'll break things down across their armor choices as well as how they possibly perform when it comes to prolonged battles, sieges, and what have you. Now, I have done a detailed breakdown of every culture's troop tree, but there have been a ton of changes to troops in the last 2 years, and while I aim to redo those videos, I figured this is a fun place to start for anyone that's looking to jump back into the game or just start it for the first time. As a bit of a disclaimer up front, I'm only looking at units that the game marks as cavalry. This means that any hybrid horse archers that are also monsters in close combat, like the Khan's Guard, will be saved for the dedicated horse archer video, and I'll be doing the same for stuff like, say, hey, with archers, well, the Fiend is a really good close combat combatant, so I'm actually going to only talk about them in the archer video, and again, so on and so forth. But feel free to jump ahead to any part or tier that interests you the most using the chapters in both the timeline and the description. Also, if you enjoy these tier list videos, please don't forget to like, comment, or subscribe. I cannot tell you how much that helps me grow as a content creator, and it's a great way to give back. Let's get started here on our cavalry unit tier list for Mount & Blade 2 Bannerlord. Starting us off, we're looking at the D tier, and there's only one unit in the D tier because I find cavalry as a whole to be very good in Mount & Blade 2 Bannerlord. But the horseman, the Battanian horseman, is just trash by comparison to a lot of the other horsemen in the game, and we're going to go through that right here. So going through this right now, kind of adding up all of their cumulative armor, which is really not how the game allocates armor, but you know, you take a look, this is at 37 body armor, and this was going to add 7 more to the body armor, even though it's on the shoulders, stuff like that. The game kind of looks at those 3 areas, your head, body, arms, and legs. So when I said 3 areas, I meant 4. And as a cavalry man, as someone of a horseman, someone on horseback, your focuses primarily are going to be body and leg, with head of course being in there as well. Arm less is important, but all of it kind of adds up, and the total armor value for these guys is 137. It is significantly lower than pretty much anyone else on our list. In addition to that, their skills are pretty just subpar. You're looking at 130 polearm, riding, and one-handed. That's the same stat line as, say, the Vlandian Vanguard, but with significantly less armor. In addition to that, you get a steel-tipped hooked spear, which is all right. We're talking about a tier 5 soldier with a tier 3 polearm. That's just kind of, again, all right. It does have a really long weapon length, and with 130 polearm, if they happen to get knocked off this horse, they still have 80 athletics, so they could use this to brace and maybe dismount someone else. But if we're talking about purely as being used as a shock cav type of unit with a one-handed beard axe and the option of a fine steel cavalry broadsword, it's just not really an amazing choice, and that's why I put it all the way down here in the D tier. And leveling it up too is not that great because the Battanian Scout is also pretty rough. It's just not going to really be holding its own. When we talk about the Mounted Skirmisher, things will be a little bit different here. So the only and the first option in our list, our D tier, is going to be the Battanian Horseman. Moving into our C tier, we have the average, the run-of-the-mill. This is the baseline that pretty much everyone I've based off of works under. So the Vlandian Vanguard, even though it's C tier, it's not terrible. It's still very good and very strong, and has a lot of really great armor to choose from and everything like that. In addition to it, it has a solid stat line, 130 polearm, riding, and one-handed. This is the same stat line that we had with the horseman, like I said before, but now we get a significant increase in armor here. So we're comparing the 137 cumulative armor of the horseman to the 152 cumulative armor that we get for the Vlandian Vanguard, and the armor discrepancy across each piece is a little bit more well balanced. You have a very good arm and leg piece, as well as a great body armor and awesome head armor piece for these guys. And the horse itself, you're looking at a Vlandian Corsair, which has a solid amount of speed, a good amount of hit points, and it's got a lot of barding on it. It would be right. For some reason, it's not showing me the barding, but it does have a great amount of barding on it. You can see from that little guy in the background, that is the chainmail barding, so it's got a lot of barding. In addition to, we're looking at the Knight Lance, which not super long lance, when it comes to its length, but it does a great amount of damage. At least there's not a whole ton of lances to truly choose from, which kind of maybe I discredited a little too hard on the horseman because I just don't like the horseman very much. But he also gets the Battanian horseman has a shield of 380 hit points. This guy's shield by comparison is 430, right? So you're just getting a much better tankier unit. A ridged arming sword too, has a nice 113 weapon length on it. And nice thing as well is there's only one armor set for the Vanguard. Every time you have Vanguards, they're going to look exactly like this. As you can see right here, it says set 1 of 1. So this is just the baseline we've established for all of our units in that C tier. Now we have one other unit to talk about, and that's the Stygian Horse Raider. Now, the Stygian Horse Raider has gotten a significant buff in a lot of the more recent patches. It actually has more armor now than the Valandian Vanguard. Going through each one of these armor pieces, its total cumulative armor is 157. That's 5 points more than the Vanguard. It's probably because he has the decorated steel lamellar shoulder pieces, which are going to give him 10 armor just right out the gate. And the heavily lamellar vest is a great little piece of armor here. The armor being lower here is kind of offset by the shoulder piece, which is nice. But then splint vambraces and the mail chausses is going to be a really nice little option here for him. With the Stygian Chaser, which gives him a very high maneuverability, which is great because that is what's going to be needed for this character, as he is not a tried and true shock cav style of unit. I call these guys skirmish cav, and every time I say cav throughout this video, I'm saying an abbreviation of cavalry, in case you're wondering. And this is mainly because I played a lot of Total War Warhammer, and there is skirmisher style units. And the way that you would use these horse raiders is you would pretty much let them use their throwing capabilities. Now they've got 130 riding, 130 one-handed, which is again that baseline, right? But rather than having 130 polearm, we're getting 130 throwing instead. We're losing about 50 points, well, losing exactly 50 points of polearm to make up for it and get that throwing skill, which to me is a very worthwhile sacrifice. Also, we get a fuller narrow war sword as one of our options, with the other one being a veteran warrior axe. Things to kind of consider with these is they both are very low weapon length, so they'll be better in a horse-to-horse combat scenario and less in a horse-to-soldier combat scenario because the length is not very long, which I've been told many times by various women in my life. Also, though, they get the broad blade javelin, which is a great javelin because there's nice 5 stacks in here, and getting these guys up to the horse raider from the woodsman is actually not too challenging. The woodsman himself and the brigand are two kind of lower tier when it comes to skirmisher style units. The Battanians have amazing ones, but these guys, they can actually kind of push into this pretty easily, and they jump onto a horse at rank or tier 4. And the Hardened Brigand is another unit that has gotten a lot of passes over the years and has become quite good. So having a whole ton of horse raiders is very easy comparatively, and also extremely strong. They've got a really good amount of armor now. They do a really great threat range to have that 130 throwing, and they still can threaten with that 80 polearm and a great amount of one-handed, and we're riding at 130. So a great unit to have here on that C tier. Moving up to our B tier, we get the Mounted Skirmisher, the Battanian Mounted Skirmisher, and we're jumping back into the Battanian line here. So we do, again, have a situation where our armor is not amazing. Only 141 armor, which is still more than the Horseman, but you're not looking at an amazing amount of armor, and that's okay, because you are looking at, stat-wise, an amazing amount of throwing. You're going to lose that same amount of polearm that you lost when taking a look at the Stygian Horse Raider, but instead, the amount of throwing you get is huge. 150 is more throwing than the Veteran Ferris, which is a noble line unit. So this guy does all the things that the Stygian Horse Raider does, but better, because he's got 20 more throwing here. So he is a way better combatant when it comes to being able to throw things. He's got hook javelins, you get 117 pierce damage, and you get that nice stack of 5. And on top of it, the Battanian Woodrunner is not amazing, but the Battanian Skirmisher into the Veteran Skirmisher are two very, very good units. And to just push them down, only it's what? You go from the Volunteer to the Woodrunner, which is passable at least, into the Skirmisher, and you're already into a very high value unit. It is great. They get 2 stacks of javs as they jump into these guys, and they lose those 1 stack of javelins to get a horse. The Mounted Skirmisher is, I think, a sleeper of the Battanian line. I've been saying this for a long time that while, yeah, the Oathsworn have gotten a lot of reworks and passes, and they're much better than they were before, the Wildlings and the Mounted Skirmishers are just so strong in the Battanian line, and they're ones that I think people don't really go for as much. And hopefully after this video, you decided to make a decision and go try them out. Let's move over into Khazate to talk about the Heavy Lancer, which is the top tier, their tier 5 cav unit, and it's a very strong one as well. We're looking at 161 cumulative armor across everything they've got, and they have a really, really strong load out here, right? The Bronze Lamellar Overmail, the Rough Tide Braces, which is not awesome, but then the Curved Boots, which are not also great, but they get so much armor from these first three first three pieces that it makes up for it. Also, we're looking at a Steppe Warhorse, so they've got a good amount of speed, high amount of maneuverability, but it's really that 250 hit points that I'm looking at right now. And looking at their stats, we see 130 polearm, 130 one-handed, again, that baseline we talked about, but now 20 more riding skill. So you get a unit that has more defensive capability than, say, your Volandian Vanguard, and they have the ability to have higher riding skill, allows them to move around quicker, and the fact that they actually have a very fast, very high hit point horse makes it even more deadly. Your set 2 is only one with the Heavy Cav Lance, which is a good weapon length of 193 and a good thrust damage of 34, and you're looking at a Fine Steel Saber here at 108. And one thing I did forget to kind of mention with the Mounted Skirmisher, he has a Fine Steel Cavalry Broadsword, which is longer than the Horse Raiders weapons. So having that option is really great. You do have the other option of one-handed Bearded Axe, which kind of sucks, but still. I just wanted to talk about that since I just brought it up here in the Heavy Lancer. And I think that the Khazate Heavy Lancer is a really strong option too, because getting to him is super easy. You go from the Nomad into a Tribal Warrior, and you're already in a Horse Archer that's going to get just tons of experience. Then moving into the Horseman is not as strong, but the Lancer then picks off, and then the Heavy Lancer just really kind of gets things kicking for you. So getting these units is extremely palatable compared to the Drusnik, who we will talk about next. Now, the Drusnik is our first noble line to consider in this list. And the Drusnik champion, why he's at the B tier and not the A tier is a number of reasons. So for one, let's take a look at just the ability to make one. Getting these three into the cav portion is actually not very easy, and the scarcity in which you can recruit them is also an extreme challenge. So if you're doing a Sturgian playthrough and you're trying to get some Drusnik champions, it's just way harder because these first 3 tiers, you don't know if they're going to live through it. The infantry line is a bit of a butcher field, right? You have no idea how well your units are going to do, especially if they're intermixed with a lot of other crap tier units. That 2 to 3 jump alone is a very hard jump, but 3 to 4 is a lot easier, and then 4 into 5 is way more, again, palatable, but it just takes, it's such a random chance of actually getting into the champion that I think it's kept them in the B tier for me. Now, looking at their overall armor, it's still very good. They have the second highest cumulative armor of any cav on this list at 199. The Imperial Elite Cataphract is just above them. So they have closed decorated goggled helmets, which give really good head armor. They've got great body armor from their pauldrons, the great body armor and arm and leg armor from the Heavy Lamellar Overmail. Then they keep that going with the plate reinforced gloves and the mail chalices. So they really have a lot going for them. This is the barding that is half mail, I believe, for the horse. So that is a little bit less armor on the horse, but they have a Sturgian Chaser, which doesn't have a ton of hit points, has the same maneuverability and speed that we've seen before. So there are those two things to kind of consider as far as like being kind of just negative points for them. But when we look at their stats, we are far above the baseline now. 170 polearm, 170 riding, 140 athletics. Now that is a crucial thing to note. The 140 athletics makes it so that the Drusnik champion has the highest athletics of anyone on this list. Also, 200 one-handed, which is all great. The bow, two-handed and throwing, they're all low. If the unit can't get to something, it will pick up a throwing weapon or throwing axe and use it, but it's kind of a useless skill because you're not gonna use it unless you find it. Now you are looking at veteran warrior axes and the forward narrow war sword. Both have very small weapon length, so again, better at hand-to-hand and better at horse-to-horse and being on foot. So that's a big thing to consider with the Drusnik amongst everything else on this list. They are probably the best in a siege scenario because they have so much athletics. It enables them to actually mount a ladder, be quick on their feet, and do some damage. All that, though, still gets anchored down by the fact that it's hard to get them up to where they're at, and the rest of their stats, when you're comparing noble lines, the other 3 noble lines just do everything so much better than the Drusnik champions do. So this concludes here our B tier. Let's move into our A tier to talk about the Ferris. And just like the D tier, the A tier only has 1 unit, and it is the Aserai Vanguard Ferris. And the Vanguard Ferris is a really, really, really good unit. It's probably one of my favorite units in the game. In fact, the whole Aserai list, troop tree, has been redone, and it is really strong and really good. I really, really am a huge fan of it. But looking at this list, we have a lot of good armor on the Ferris. Looking at 189, which is significantly high. Again, that's number 3 as far as the total cumulative armor on this horse. On this list. But we get a very fast horse with the Aserai horse. 66 speed, 70 maneuverability, lower on the hit point, so not going to be as amazing. If it's charging in and out of combat, there's a chance that that horse might get killed, and that's not too fun, not too great for anyone. But looking at its weapon loadout, we get the Kaskaras. These things are always amazing. They always have really great swing damage and thrust damage, but they also have really great handling and weapon length. 116 weapon length is very significant for this character. In addition, we get Jarid, which are some of the best throwing weapons in the game. 121 pierce, stack of 5, which is great. Their shield is very small, which is very unfortunate. And it only has 420 health versus 500 of, say, the Drusnik or the Cataphract. And they also, though, get a Mamluk Lance, which does have a good amount of damage here and a good length, lower on the handling side, and it is couchable. But look at its stat line, and we get some pretty disgusting stuff to look at. So 200 polearm. So we have a character that has more polearm than the Drusnik champion, right? Which is funny because this is not really necessarily a pure combat Cav choice like the Drusnik champion is. And that's why the Drusnik champion really was also in the B tier. You looked at its combat stats in the polearm, which you're wanting to be doing a lot of stuff with, is at 170 compared to the 200 of the Aserai Vanguard Ferris. Also, 170 riding here, which is great. 170 one-handed, which is a little bit on the lower side. So when it comes to horse-to-horse combat or fighting in a siege or fighting other infantry soldiers, not as good as the rest of the noble lines, but it makes up for it with 140 throwing. That is spicy. And with the Jarid being the throwing weapon that he's using, the Ferris is just devastating. And the nice thing too about the recruitment of the Ferris is you're going to find these in abundance in the Aserai lands. There's a lot of really good prosperity towns that are going to lead to good prosperity villages that then have a ton of Aserai youths. Now the youth is a very, not bad. It's just it's a tier 2 kind of crap cav unit. But as soon as you get into the horsemen, you start getting javelins, and you don't even need them to get into close combat to start racking up tons of experience. And it just progresses and landslides into both of the Ferrises and culminates in that Vanguard Ferris. And the Vanguard Ferris too has a ton of armor on its horse. He has a ton of armor. It is easily one of my favorite units in the game. You can have these guys hold fire, and they will wreck shop against a whole bunch of infantry. They just have so many tools at their disposal. Well, let's now move from the A tier into that top tier, that S tier, the best of the best. And to start our S tier off, we're looking at the Volandian Banner Knight. Now, usually when you look at a tier list, that tier is kind of on the same level. And this is kind of on the same level. The Banner Knight, I feel, though, honestly, is a little bit worse than the Elite Cataphract, but not by much. It's like if I had an S+, I'd probably put him there. And the only reason is because the Banner Knight's durability is just a little bit lower, well, significantly lower than the Elite Cataphract. So it's why I'm talking about the Banner Knight first here. They do still have great armor. We're talking about 179 cumulative armor across all of their pieces of armor. I would want their green hood though to get replaced with some of the new shoulder pieces from the Volandian line that were just added in beta branch 1.8.0. We don't have those in yet, and I think that's very unfortunate. We do get a Volandian Corsair though, which gives a significant amount of hit points and a good-ish speed at 52, higher maneuverability at 68. Tons of armor though, as you can see. That's that full mail barding on him. But here's where the Banner Knight really shines, is he has 260 polearm. That is significant. The only one to tie him on that is the Cataphract. But to kind of put that in perspective, that's 60 more polearm than a Ferris. That is 90 more polearm than the Družinik champion. And you're probably wondering, okay, well, what does that all really mean? When it comes to combat stats, polearm, one-handed throwing, those extra 10 points, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 points, whatever it is, they equal swing speed bonuses, swing damage bonuses, whatever it is, percentage increases to all of that. So being 90 points above the Družinik champion is just huge. So just as being able to charge in and do damage with his Knight Lance, obviously that's going to be just doing tons of damage because he has 260 polearm. Also with 200 riding, he is tied with the Cataphract for the most riding of the entire list, let alone the noble line. But with 220 one-handed, he has the most one-handed on this list, period. So this makes him very good when it comes to fighting against other horsemen, fighting other infantry, being in a siege, all those things. And on top of it, recruitable, the Volandian Squire is actually not that bad. It looks like he's terrible, right? Because he has the Gambison, Akiton, or Akaton, whatever you want to call it. But this is actually a pretty solid little piece of armor. You can find these things in abundance in the northwestern portion of Volandia. It's quite easy to stumble across them, or by, I think it's Galland. You can find tons. I think it's the capital of Volandia. So you can find a ton of the squires around there. But as soon as they jump into Gallants, they're just automatically way better. And the Knight is even better. The Champion's amazing. And the Banner Knight just kind of follows that trend. One thing that I do think that the Banner Knight kind of has as a detractor for it, one, its shield's pretty small and it is pretty low in health at 430, but it has 3 different sets, which is kind of unfortunate. So the first set, you get a ridged arming sword, great weapon length, good handling, good damage, all these things. But then the next one you jump into is a spiked battle axe. You've lost your length immediately down to 67. You almost have your length. So 2 of the 3 sets are really only going to shine when you're fighting against other cav or you are in a siege scenario. That being said though, because this is an axe and because this next one here is a mace, you will be doing more damage to people that are heavily armored. Now that has been refactored here most recently in patch 1.8.0, and armor is now significantly more important and blunt damage does significantly less towards armor. So those things are all something to consider. It still does do more damage than say a sword, but like I said, when you're talking about using this purely as a shock cavalry unit, it does not stack up to the monster that is the elite Cataphract. And the elite Cataphract is so good for a lot of different reasons. Before we even talk about anything skill or armor-wise, equipment-wise, its viability or its availability on the map is huge. Because when you think of the 6 cultures, you really kind of have to think of it as 8 cultures. Because if you're looking at Volandia, Khazate, Sturgia, Aserai, that's 4. Well, then you've got Imperial, and Imperial is split across 3 different factions of Imperial. So on the map, you have 3 factions worth of Imperial cultural places to look for Vizsla recruits or Imperial Equite. And they're just so good as soon as they jump even just to the Equite. The Vizsla recruit is not bad on foot. It's just a tier 2 foot crap soldier. And despite what I said about the Družinik, the Vizsla recruit works at tier 2. The Družinik has to stay on foot for 3 tiers before it actually gets a horse. And immediately when we get into the Imperial Equite, we get a very strong unit. And on top of it, if you start as Imperial, you have the ability to get even more of these guys because you can recruit Imperial units, Imperial prisoners without any hit to your morale. So it just you can just stockpile them. And it's so easy to just get tons and tons of prisoners of the heavy horseman cataphract or elite cataphract and just convert them over time. Now, going back to the elite cataphract, let's talk about its actual armament because it is impressive. The most armor of anyone on this list at 211 cumulative armor just keeps these guys armored from head to toe, and it shows, right? Even their horse, the Imperial Charger, which is terrible. I'm not gonna lie to you. It is a tier 1 horse. It is got 290 hit points though, and that is where it that's what makes it significantly good. It fits the role of the cataphract, but it's very slow. 44 speed, 66 maneuverability. I think it's the slowest speed horse on this list, but it has, again, the highest hit points of any horse on this list, and is tons of male barding too, or Lamlar barding, scale barding, whatever the hell it is. Either way, that is really good barding. I think that's actually the top barding in the game. Also, we're looking at the Corsair Lance, which I think has been changed around multiple times. It used to be the Cataphract Lance. Did they lose it entirely? Yeah, they lost it entirely. Used to have a special Cataphract Lance. But this one is now braceable. It has a huge weapon length of 225, which is great. The Knight's Kite Shield. This is the highest shield on the list, 2 at 550. It is still a small shield, but when you're armored this much, who really cares? And the nice thing here too is this only has one set, and the Fine Steel Paramirian is a very good weapon. Has a great amount of damage at 72, has good speed and great handling at 84 and 116 length. It's just such a juggernaut. Then when we look at the skills, we're getting that 260 polearm. That's what I said is the highest polearm next to the Banner Knight on this list. The riding is 200. So while it is not better than the Banner Knight, it's still the best riding. And the one-handed is 200. Now, the Stygian Drusnik champion does share that 200 one-handed, so there is that to kind of consider. And we're looking at a pretty significantly lower athletics at 60. It's just kind of something to point out when it comes to sieges, that they will suffer as far as, but along with the Banner Knight, right? When it comes to being kind of maneuverable on the battlefield. But these guys are they're so strong. In the open field, they're so strong against other infantry units. They're great in sieges just because they are armored from head to toe. They are just honestly one of the best units in the game. And I think that them being at the top spot here makes sense because defensibility is really a huge thing for this game, because longevity is what's really going to keep you in the fight longer, right? So Banner Knight, while really good, they do die in droves when you're using them. You can find that they'll just die in heaps to either other archers or an amassed bit of spearmen. You just kind of have to be more mindful of that. With the Elite Cataphract, I don't mind as much. If I'm comparing the cumulative score from 179 of the Banner Knight to the 211 of the Imperial Elite Cataphract and a better shield, they just have so much more defensive capabilities attached to them that I think really makes them shine. But that concludes here our tier list for all of the shock cavalry, the cavalry of Mount & Blade 2 Bannerlord. So go ahead and let me know in the comment section below. How would you organize this list? Would you do this differently? Do you think that the Vanguard Ferris is the true S tier and both the Banner Knight and the Cataphract are more of an A tier? Or do you feel like, hey, I've used the Horseman in a better scenario. You're doing it wrong. You got to use them like this. Whatever it is, let me know in the comment section below. Do you like the Drusnik champion because he just has so much more capability to be better on the battlefield on foot? Or do you prefer, say, again, the Heavy Lancer because he's just so easy to get tons of on the battlefield? As always, guys, though, thank you so much for watching here today. Go ahead and let me know, too, what you want the next tier list video to be. Do you want it to be heavy infantry? Do you want it to be skirmisher-style infantry, archers, whatever it is? Go ahead and let me know, and I will use that as my next focus for the next video. And as always, though, again, like I said, thank you so much for watching here today. Have a good one, and take care.